Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle and Ryan from Automatic Comics and Drew from Como Comics. We got a very special video for you guys here today. We're talking some pre-code horror, underrated and iconic covers by three kind of legendary pre-code horror artists. If you guys are finding this video for the very first time, we actually have other videos that we did on everyone's channel over at Ryan's channel and Como's channel, where we kind of broke up our discussion. So after you watch this video here, make sure to hop over to their channels and watch the other picks that we had. But kind of the task at hand was to pick three artists, pick some iconic books for those artists, some underrated books for those artists, and talk about them here today. And I guess before we jump in, Ryan or Drew, thanks for hopping on the channel. Do you guys have anything to say or thoughts on our pre-code horror talk so far?
No, just happy to be here. And yeah, I mean, pre-code horror in general has been a lot more on the I feel like in the comic community's like general discussion than it has been in the past. I mean, when you go on to things like Instagram claim sales, that kind of thing, you see it a little more often. So I think it's a fun thing to talk about because I think people are starting to get a little more interested in it. And so try to familiarize everyone with some of these big artists and some of those really popular and underrated covers.
Yeah, I think it's a blessing and a curse. Those of us who have been fans for a while kind of appreciated that it was flying under the radar for so long. But we don't live in that world anymore. It's been nice in the fact that you can just scroll through your phone and see some of these great books come up that before you'd hunt for and just never have a chance to own. So it's pros and cons all the way around, but it's fun to always have people to talk about and share common interests with. And I find that pre-code horror is one of those things where you can really go down the rabbit hole with other collectors on, and it's just a great part of the community.
Well, the tide is turning when I have a handful of pre-code horror videos in 1 month on my channel. So definitely things are getting pretty hot for these horror themed books, in the spirit of Halloween, of course. But, with that said, let's kind of jump right into it. And I'll start off here in terms of iconic books. Now, the artist I had is the legendary honest Johnny Craig. And of all of the Johnny Craig books, there's, of course, tons of them to talk about. But one of the most iconic books that he, of course, did is this one right here, Crime Suspense Stories, number 22 from April of 1954. And this is just kind of the iconic decapitated head cover, basically the legendary sort of court case cover. And if you guys sort of know the story, I'll happily butcher it for you guys right here. But of course, when Bill Gaines was being tried for having these violent covers, and the Comics Code was being formed, and they wanted to stop these covers, this was one of the specific comic books that was very famously held up by the judge. And he asked him, do you feel like these covers are appropriate for children? And, Bill Gaines' rebuttal was something to the effect of, well, as long as they're done tastefully. And he holds up this book and he says, do you think that this book is in good taste? And he said, well, yeah, because the neckline is actually being cut off. So you actually don't see, technically speaking, the decapitated head. And then and the judge says, well, she does have blood in her mouth. And Bill Gaines famously responds, just a little. And I don't know if that won over the jury, but it is a hilarious line. And one day when we see a movie adapted, at some way about the whole thing, I think that'll be a great, a line for that. So anyways, I think with the kind of history with this book and the violence of the cover, I think this really has become top three, top two in terms of notoriety of pre-code horror covers right here. Very expensive, as you can see from some of the numbers, which we'll dig into. But Ryan, I know you got this book in your collection, maybe a couple of them. I mean, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before, and I was saying that I did have one that it was like a 1.8 or a 2.0, and even though you can see on there that there are 334 copies on the census, that seems like a lot, but there are only like 2 or so available on eBay right now. And part of that is I never would have let my copy go if I didn't get a new copy that I thought was a nicer grade. And so this is one of those those horror books that a lot of collectors, and for Pre-Code Horror, it's just once you get it, you're not letting it go. And if somebody wants it, they're going to really have to pay you for it, because even though there's 334, most of those are probably sticking in collections and not going to leave them.
And the number is a testament to some of the other things we've been saying. It's like the values are so high, you almost kind of have to slab it at that point because there's so much money in it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so my upgraded copy I bought raw, and it's nerve wracking because I'm like, well, I guess there could be some restoration on it, maybe trimming, something I missed, which is still possible because it is at CGC right now.
Right.
And then you've also got like, what if CGC mishandles it? You know, what if they tear part of the cover? Like I took video of mine before I sent it. I'm like, I am going to have something that I can at least be like, hey, this huge tear on the bottom of the spine wasn't there. So that kind of stuff. But with a lot of the other books we've talked about, you know, it's 100 copies on census, 50 copies on census. Like the 334 really is a testament to how many people want this book. I mean, that is a high number for the golden age.
Yeah. Drew, what do you think about this one? I'm not sure. Do you have this one in your collection? Is this a book you're targeting?
I don't. Not for lack of wanting. I prioritize some superhero stuff, mostly because I hate myself and I'm meant to suffer. But no, it's always been on my list. I've just always put it on the back burner, and now it's just going to cost me. So whether I have to throw a Hulk 181 out there and get it sold just to generate the funds to buy one of these one day or something like that, it's going to take some sort of a substantial sacrifice from the current collection just to, you know, finance something like this. I love it. It's so, yeah, it's kind of shocking, but then at the same time, if you really kind of look past the obvious stuff, like what is this guy wearing? I mean, it's like Elmer Fudd almost, you know. I mean, like he's got these high waters on, and who holds that
nice Bugs Bunny there, you know, and he's greens. You know, like
it's so weird when you can actually stop and think about just the stuff they don't want you to focus on. I don't know why that's always stuck out to me, but
yeah. Well, and one of the things I always point out with this one, people are like, oh, you know, it's like, it's so violent. I'm like, that blood is black. Like, this was clearly like a demon or something. He was doing the Lord's work, you know,
or she'd been dead, or it's like,
it goes back to his testimony of, you know, this is tastefully done.
Yeah. And we're all making assumptions. This could be a separate dead person.
There's two people in the picture
down there. So we don't really know, but no, I've passed a few copies of this, even a restored copy in the last couple of years. And now looking at a 1.5 universal price of over $3,000, I think it was $2,200 they wanted for this 3.5 restored copy. That doesn't seem awful just a year or so later. So it's to my regret, a book I'm still on the hunt for, but it's going to remain on my list until it's safely in the PC.
Yeah. Well, a classic book, one that has been homaged many times. You mentioned the 181. There's that Wolverine one, I think, that is pretty popular as well. And yeah, I think definitely a cover that will be homaged many times over, and you know, it's very popular. And you can see the floor price, just getting in the club at that 1.5 grade is $3,000. So definitely not easy to get in the club. The 6.0, these are all 2022 sales. The 6.0, that's a 7 right there. So 7,800. And then the 8.5, 31,349 at the this year in 2022. I'm not really sure what the highest graded book is, but it would be interesting to see what that would sell for today.
Well, and Drew, you sent me, I think you sent me that picture from that show that you go to.
Oh yeah.
In the background, or one of the shots is the original cover art for this. And I was like, oh wow, gosh, how much did that go for now?
And it's in like a Mylar sleeve, just taped on the wall with a couple other easy covers.
So funny.
It's only like 7 years old, or 7 or 8 years old. But no, it's OathCon. It's a show in Norman, Oklahoma I go to every year. It's like in an Embassy Suites conference center, but you'll have some of the biggest dealers and collectors in the country in that room. And we We drink, we eat, we talk comics, we buy comics, we sell comics. It's one of my favorite weekends the whole year. It's such a fun show. And it's actual like Oath as a club, so people will bring show and tell stuff. So the first EC page I saw like a Graham Ingalls end page to some story he did, which that's always where the twist is, and it's just tangent, I know, but no, it's a great show.
Yeah. All right, well, let's kind of go on to the next iconic book we have right here, and I think that this one is going to be Drew's pick. So, Drew, you want to kind of tell us about this one?
Yeah, I'm going to flex here. There are 29 total copies of this book on the census, and this is the as great as Crime Suspense 22 is. I think for honest to God EC collectors, not necessarily just Pre-Code Horror collectors, I feel like this is the book. This is Tales of Terror Annual #1. It's a 1951 annual. And that's probably being a little generous because all they really did is they stripped 4 unsold issues. So as many Gaines file copies as we had, this is what they did with all their stuff that didn't sell. They just stripped the covers off of it, grouped them together in groups of 4, and slapped new covers on them every year. So there's like Weird Science Fantasy annuals. There's a war annual. I can't remember the title of that because my brain's not working right now. But they just cram all these unsold issues in there, staple them together, new cover, and voila. And they only distributed these in select markets. So they're really, really scarce. On top of that, this is another image that has been homaged and repurposed and just really splattered all over this part of the hobby ever since it came out. It's an infinity cover, but you've just got, Al Feldstein's guy. He always draws the guy, and he's reading a copy of the book you're holding in your hands. And it's an infinity cover. It just keeps going. But then in the background, you've got ghosts and werewolves and creatures and the horror hosts and all this. It's got a lot going on, but it's just super awesome. And now in the last few years, we've actually gotten to the point where when you have one of these things slabbed, they're going through and they're telling you what the issues that comprise the book are. And I've seen copies that are actually, they consist of all first issues of these various EC stories. So there'd be like Vault 12, Weird Science 12, Haunt 15, and just so on and so forth. And it's just unbelievable to think that you can have an annual composed of those first issues. And I think when we get to the point where that's more common, that all the issues are listed within, because I've heard of guys that are sending theirs back in just to have these notes added to the label. I think you'll find that those issues will have a premium to them.
Yeah, but you'll actually get variations, just not based on condition, but based on what the interior
what the contents are. Yeah. So that's really cool. And I'll tell you what, this is a book that I note that there's only been 4 public sales since 2020. This is a book that changes hands, but it doesn't change hands in public. I'm a member of some EC groups and things like that, and you'll see discussion about trades that happen offline between private collectors, and that's really because only the private collectors know generally who has these to know where to go to get them. I've seen more copies of this book come up, even just there was a copy, I think Grails or somebody had one this last week. I actually saw a copy at C2E2. It's the first time I'd ever seen one in person. They never traded hands out in the daylight. So it's been a really interesting time as Pre-Code Horror has started to catch on to see some of these start to come out of the woodwork, because I absolutely love it. They're really rare. And you could make a case. I easily could have put any of the other 2 Tales of Terror covers on one of my picks, but this one is the heavy hitter, and it's just one of those books that stops you in your tracks. Like if you know what it is and you see one, it doesn't matter what's going on. If you're in a conversation, if you're walking, everything you were doing stops, and that has your attention. So,
I mean,
Ryan, what do you got on this one?
You stole some of my talking points that I was going to mention, because I was
Paybacks, man.
one of the
Paybacks.
things I was going to mention was about how it's such a rare book. Like, I never see this book come up for sale in like auctions, but I have been seeing them on Instagram. And that's why I tell people, like, when people ask me like, oh, where do you look for books? Where do you find this stuff? I'm like, do not pigeonhole yourself into just eBay, just Heritage, just Comic Link, whatever, because you never know where you're going to find some of this stuff. And I have found some big, rare books on places like Instagram. And I think a lot of people just don't think that like Instagram would be the place where you would have these like big comic like heavy hitter type books. But I mean, I've seen a Superman 1 sell on an Instagram sale. I mean, like, big sales happen on these Instagram pages. And this book, I think one of the other things that's tricky with it on Instagram is that if you had just been on there within the last like 8 months, you might think this book was kind of common, because I saw it come up for sale maybe like 4 times. But I had never seen this book come up for sale before that, you know? And so I've noticed that with a lot of like really rare or expensive books, where you won't have seen it come up for like 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden one comes up for sale. And then you see like 2 or 3 or 4 right afterwards. And people will think like, oh, I can get that book anytime. But then it doesn't come up again for like another 4 years. So you really do need to take advantage of those situations. If that's something you've been looking for and you start to see a few of those surface, you probably aren't going to see them surface for very long.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it feels like we've talked about it on some of the other videos where, you know, if one comes on the market and then that kind of establishes a new sort of price range, that's why you might see a few more coming after, because people are like, oh, well, at that price, I definitely want to sell mine. But once there's that turnover, you know, then these are the new holders who probably are not going to sell.
You're like, I've waited 5 years to get this book. I'm not selling it now.
and you can see, just Drew, from some of the numbers you put in. I mean, you know, I'm always interested in the floor price. You know, just the 1.5. Is that a 7? I assume 7,800. Yeah. So you can just say, like, you know, that right there, you want to get in this club. You're gonna have to pony up.
At C2E2, I found a 2.5. It was the ugliest 2.5 you'd ever seen. It had like the old tape that yellows and peels all the way around the cover. It was just not a very aesthetically pleasing 2.5. And they had 18K on it, and it wasn't scaring me off. Like, it was price strong, but I also know that that's a book that you have to pay what it is.
Yeah.
When you have the opportunity.
Thick. It's like,
it's 4 like pre-code horror. You see,
this goes in the CGC like real thick.
And that was the reason one of the reasons I wanted to hold it. Yeah, it's a fat slab. It's really chunky. You could hurt somebody with it if you needed to. But it's a book that I've had conversations like with Mrs. Como and stuff. It's like, you know, there are a lot of books out there I'd like to have. And there are books that for financial reasons, I'll never own. I'll never have an Action 1. I'll never have a Detective 27. What I told her about this book, it's like, it's most likely a book that I'll never own, not because I can't afford it. I mean, it's not inexpensive, but it's doable. It's a book I'll likely never own because I won't have an opportunity to buy it. And I about fell over when I actually did have an opportunity to buy it, but that conversation was years old. So it's been really interesting to see them kind of start to show up. And one thing I will point out that's not on the slide, we got that 5.0 sale last September, back in 2021 for 36K. That's nowhere near the top of the census. There are 5 copies. So, you know, almost 20% of the entire census above that, with the top being a 9.0. And I got to think that book would just be a monster if it ever came to the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back to the just the aesthetics again. Al Feldstein cover, just a lot of fun. You know, just with all the ghouls and goblins and witches and the three you know, narrators over the kid. Just you know, just very very iconic to him, as we you know kind of talked about a lot of his aesthetics that he's using. So
who needs an angel or a devil on your shoulder when you've got the Galunatics hanging around?
Exactly. All right. Well, going on now to the next iconic book. I think that this one, of course, belongs to Ryan. Ryan, you want to tell us about your choice right here?
Yep. So the cover artist that I've been talking about in these different videos is Lee Elias, and this is there were 3 books basically that to me are the ones that are the tent pole books for him, and this is one of them. And
yeah. There
are 2 that are really gruesome. This is the one that they're competitors for what is one of the most gruesome pre-code horror covers that exists. So Tomb of Terror 15. May 1954. We've talked about that a number of times, where as you get into 54, that's when you get the different publishers just kept going, one-upping each other, just more and more violent covers. And this is up there near the top. And so it's got that classic cover status. You've got the woman on the front who is this guy's face exploding in front of her. So she is clearly shocked. This is, again, not one of those books that you really want to put on your shelf for guests. You kind of maybe have that in the basement, or you put it in, like you hide it away when people are coming over. But yeah, I mean, it's got kind of that black background, everything, just the colors really, really pop in this one. It tends to look pretty nice even when it's in low grade. This is one of those books that there's just enough going on the cover that it can hide a lot of flaws that are on the cover. So you can still get some decent looking copies that are in lower grade. Census count, over 100, so 121 universal copies. The high sale, talked about this in the other videos as well. I think all of the high sales on mine for the iconic books were from November of 2021, and that was the Black Cat collection that came up for sale on Heritage. And this was a 9.6, and let me see. This is the top on Census, but it's not the single highest graded. There are 2 9.6s that are out there, but 45,600. When you're hitting those mid 5-figure numbers, I mean, that is a big number for pre-code horror, because one of the things I always like to talk about with these is when you're hitting that type of number, you have a lot of options if you're a buyer in terms of the type of book that you could get. And a lot of people will think that, oh, well, if you can afford that book, you can probably afford any book. But that's not necessarily the case. There are definitely people that will build their collection around a single really, really nice high grade book, and they can only get that one. And so when you're spending, $40,000, $50,000 on a book, you may not have any other book that's even close to that. You may have other 5-figure books that are 10,000 or something like that, but this could be your key main book. Like this is your AF-15 or whatever it is for a pre-code horror collector. But with this one, there are actually none on eBay at the moment. I've talked about that with each of my books. Like if there's actually something available out there, there is nothing available out there, at least that I could see for this book. Last 12 months, there have been 7 sales, which is, I mean, on the higher end, I guess, for a pre-code horror book. But you can see the numbers here, a 3.5 going for 6,500, 9.6, 45,000. So in the lower to mid grades, this is around $2,000 a point. That's what we've seen with a lot of these big iconic horror keys, is $2,000 per grade point is around where they're going. They're expensive. There's a lot of demand for them, and easily one of those top 5 to top 10 type overall covers for pre-code horror.
Yeah. This is one of those where, we talked about in some of the other videos, of course, Chamber of Chills 19. I feel like these books are completely opposite, even though they're done by the same artist, where one is just classy and you can't wait to show it to all of your non-comic friends. And then there's this one right here, which is like, I don't know. I feel like as far as unsettling thing to look at, I feel like this one is more unsettling to me than the Black Cat book that he also did. Exploding Face, like, yeah, I mean, I get it. I get why people want it. This is not one that I personally would want in my collection, but it is definitely one of the mega, mega, mega keys that people really like. I mean, it is that eyeball that's just like flying out.
That's one of the things that does it.
Yeah, it's the eyeball, the extension off of his eye socket is just another thing right there. So definitely an interesting book. I mean, one that, like, we talk a little bit about like the Instagram sales and stuff, and I've seen it a couple times, and every time it gets rolled out, it's definitely like there's talk in the chat, whether people can actually afford it that day when they make that purchase, it's another thing, because it's obviously expensive, but it is a big book that people get excited to see.
Yeah, my thing with it, I've always just wondered what the heck's going on. Why is this guy's face exploding?
That's what I've never understood. Like,
Right?
is there
I
a
mean,
bomb going off on his
yeah,
face?
but she's fine. You know,
Did
she's
she?
standing right there. If it was like a bomb or a grenade or something, it's like, well, she'd be in rough shape too. So,
Did he get the Breaking Bad Giancarlo Esposito treatment? Maybe, right? A little bomb in the face or something.
I don't know, but I feel like I've just always been two in my head because I get that I'm supposed to be shocked by this, but then I'm just like, no, what's happening here? Tell me why this doesn't make sense. But
She has an amazing right cross.
I'm glad you said that though, because it's something I've always wondered too. I always wondered
Yeah.
if was I the only one that was like, what's going on this cover? Why is his face exploding?
Not at all. But that said, you can't take away from it. It's so shocking and just in your face and up to 11.
Harvey definitely was not editing there.
No,
yeah, Harvey was pushing it. Jesus.
No, they were hoping he'd come up with something even worse every single month. And I mean, he
That's
did it a lot,
I wonder what those conversations were like. Like if they had like the different artists maybe talked at all or anything, and we're like, what can we put on this cover that's even more ridiculous than last one?
Oh, you're doing that? I'm gonna do this.
You have an exploding face.
Yeah. It's like you get a bunch of dudes together, you have the stink challenge. It's like you've got to come up with something that smells worse. So I got to come up with a cover that's worse, like more gross than your cover that you just came up with.
Yeah, and there was only one more issue after this one. I mean, it was over very soon after these ones were coming out.
Yeah. Maybe it's just like, what are they going to do? Cancel us?
Thanks so much for watching the video. Be sure to head over to Automatic Comics channel and Como Comics channel as well to catch the other parts of this series for top pre-code horror books, and stay on the lookout for the next video series where we talk about underrated pre-code horror books. Also, if you're interested in reading my take on the pre-code horror genre, be sure to hop over to the pre-launch page for my Kickstarter comic book called Sanity. Give it a follow if you're interested. Link in the description.